All right, welcome to week 10. This week we are taking a comparative look at the role that executives play in different regimes and how the powers of the executives can vary across countries and cultures. As Americans, our bias is to think in terms of America and Britain as sort of stereotypes for all of the varieties of presidential and parliamentary forms of governance. As we'll learn this week, while the United States and the United Kingdom are certainly influential, uh, and many countries have patterned their systems of government after us, there are also a lot of different variations on the theme of executive governance. Comparing executives is sort of a central thing that comparativists do. Um, the main thing that we're looking at this week is how different countries design their executives and how that design, how design and culture interact to create a distinctive approach to politics and governance. So if you were to compare the executives of, the office of the presidency in the United States and in France and in Russia, you'd be looking at kind of presidential systems of government in comparison, with our system of government, with two semi-presidential systems of government, which is to say, France and Russia have mixed presidential parliamentary systems, and they elect presidents separately, but they also elect prime ministers, and those guys interact in ways that are pretty interesting. So, what powers do they share? In what ways are executive powers available to presidents, that are available to presidents in each of those systems distinct? I think those kinds of questions are really fascinating. Um, so what are some of the key issues we're going to address this week? We need to understand the distinction between parliamentary and presidential systems of government, and how those systems differ from one another, and the kinds of variations that exist within both approaches to the executive branch or to the executive office. We also want to better understand executive legislative relations and how those relationships are structured by the nature of executive constituencies. Within a parliamentary system, for example, the head of government is basically the head of the parliamentary party in the majority. And so long as they command the votes of the majority in parliament, they can set policy and execute laws as they want. Because presidents, in contrast, are elected separately from the legislature, they have to figure out ways of securing legislative support for their agenda, and that's oftentimes difficult to do. So each system has its advantages and disadvantages, and we want to understand what makes each system work and how they can break down. The formal and informal powers of executives is an important topic. Some executives have the power to issue a decree, which is basically executive legislation, which I suspect most Americans instinctively go, ooh, that's a bad idea, because our constitutional system basically denies that sort of power to executives in preference to the system of checks and balances and separation of powers. The process for removing corrupt or ineffective presidents or executives varies across systems as well. Presidential systems have an impeachment process, and the parliamentary systems have votes of no confidence. Coalition formation is especially important for understanding parliamentary government. Most parliamentary systems have electoral rules that render remote the likelihood that one party will gain a clear majority, which compels the successful party to form a coalition following elections with minor parties. And this can be a source of instability, as we learned in week 2 when we were talking about Italy. Executives also have informal powers that contribute to an executive's ability to provide leadership, which is one of the main reasons why executives exist. Teddy Roosevelt pointed to, for example, president's ability to command attention and influence public opinion to be something like a bully pulpit. And that is one of several valuable powers that executives can wield in their efforts to move government in a particular direction. The rest of the chapter involves some interesting sections on factors that contribute to the stability or instability of executive offices within different systems of government, and that should provide us with lots of interesting things to talk about this week. We only have the forum and the quiz on chapter 10 for this week. But I warn you that the Unit 2 examination is next week, so if you haven't been reviewing and looking through the study guides for chapters 7 through 11, I'd definitely start doing that now. All right, let's have a great week.